A common trend you might have noticed with my channel and collection is that when I find a watch I really like, I often end up with multiple versions of it. That can be enough of a problem on its own, but when that model happens to be a JDM limited edition, the problem is a little bigger. Welcome to Addicted to Watches. Today, we're looking at another watch that is the result of the collaboration between Seiko and TicTac for their 35th anniversary, and another watch that really struck a chord with collectors. Where the previous version was a matte black dial, this time around it's a brilliant grey sunburst. This is the Seiko SZSB007. If this looks familiar, it probably should. In a recent video, I looked at another model from this release, the 006, with black dial, and before that still, a more recent release, the 032 with beige dial. Clearly this has been a successful design for the brand as they're continuing to use and reuse it. In fact, this and the green model, the 021, have been re-released on a bracelet as opposed to the leather straps they originally came on in the form of the 034 and 035. As far as I can tell, besides the bracelet, they are the same watches, so it's nice that at least newer collectors or people who missed out originally have a chance to pick one up again. For all these models, including this one we have here, the retail price has been 55,000 Japanese yen, or the equivalent it converts to in your preferred currency. I won't bore you with the whole story of these models again, but they were made to celebrate the anniversary of a watch retailer in Japan and released as limited editions, though the number they are limited to has never actually been released and doesn't seem to be particularly low. With that out of the way, we can take a closer look at the watch in front of us and start with the most striking part, the dial. This watch features a brilliant, very dynamic grey sunburst dial. It can change from light grey or almost silver to a much deeper charcoal grey depending on the way the light is hitting it. Grey as a dial colour is one I don't think gets enough attention by brands, but looks fantastic when done well. For the markers, this watch more or less follows the formula of the TicTac model family. Around the dial are rectangular markers on the hours, in this case applied and vertically textured to create a bit of a rainbow effect. They have no beveling to speak of, and as a result can look a bit flat, but still sit distinctly above the dial surface. At the 12 and 6 we have those numerals to complete the look, and these too have been applied and highly polished. Also applied and also highly polished is the Seiko logo, which is located in pride of place above the pinion. Down underneath, we get probably more text than was actually necessary in these three lines, each with a different font. I think the 10 bar could have been dropped as it stands out a little more with its modern style compared to the other two. This has all been printed in white, just like the minute track encircling the dial. It has minutes that stretch in a bit further than the partial seconds, also marked, and even though you've heard it from me before, I'll say it again. I really like this as a design element, creating a frame for the dial as a whole and providing detail without clutter. Also printed in a matching white is the frame around the date complication at 3. The date wheel beneath is also white, but by now we're all accustomed to Seiko not doing too much to match their date wheels with their dials. The other key ingredient in the dial is the hands. Here we have a cathedral handset quite similar to the one seen on the Alpinist from Seiko. They have a skeletonized base before the lume starts at about a third of the way down each hand. The hour has been divided into 3 sections at its bulbous end, while the minutes hand has just 2. Both hands have syringe tips to extend them that little bit extra and enhance legibility. The second hand is a simple needle hand with arrow tip filled with lume. Speaking of lume, let's take a look. Here we have another of the main differences between this and other models from these collabs. On this 007, only the hands are lumed. There is no lume to speak of whatsoever on the dial at all, so while reading the time after dark isn't impossible, it can be tricky. I feel like it wouldn't have been too hard to shorten the applied markers a little and place some lume dots around the outer edge of the dial, but Seiko designers in their wisdom decided not to. All of that is covered by an element carried over from the 006, a pretty nice piece of hardlex crystal. It may not be sapphire, but still does a good job. It's domed and creates some really pleasing distortion on more extreme angles, meaning it's only a single dome. I've never had much of an issue with reflections, so even though there's no AR coating, it does well for itself. Considering that the case is exactly the same as the one used for the SZSB006 and the 032, these dimensions will be pretty familiar. Across the case we measure the diameter at 39.9mm, lug to lug is 47.9, and height is 12.7mm. It is a little bigger than some of the 38 or 39mm case sizes that have been popular in recent times, but it is still far from a large watch. These dimensions give it presence, but it's not overbearing at all. That 40mm case size is understandably paired with a 20mm lug width for easy strap changes. But of course, as always, the numbers can only tell you so much. What we have is a fairly sporty case with some classic shapes and finishes. Up front is a polished bezel and lugs with circular brushing. These lugs taper nicely from the round curve of the case to become fairly narrow by their ends. Looking from side on, they turn down quite a bit and have been polished on a flat side of the case. To make changing out the strap easy, the lugs have also been drilled, which is nice to see. Around the other side, we can see a set of crown guards, which add to the sporty look of the case. They're protecting a pretty simple unsigned crown that does not screw down, but can be used to wind the movement. That movement is of course the Seiko 4R35, also known as the NH35 when supplied outside of the Seiko brand. It's the brand's entry-level mechanical movement that hacks, hand winds, and beats at 3 Hz or 6 times per second. It's proven itself to be reliable and reasonably robust, though not the most accurate movement out there. Stated tolerances from the factory are -35 to +45 seconds per day, though most will perform better than that. There isn't much in terms of decoration, but at the price that's pretty unsurprising. What you can see from back here is the mark of the collaboration printed on the display window, TicTac Limited Edition. Limited Edition should be in quotation marks, because Seiko has never announced how limited these are, or any of the other models for that matter. It must be pretty high, because these have been readily available in Japan for quite a while. One last thing to cover is the strap on the watch. It comes on this black leather strap with a crocodile pattern. If you've had any experience with Seiko leather straps from this era, you'll know that it's average, to be generous. It'll get the job done and looks better than some of their others with a more matte finish, but you'll be changing it out pretty quickly. The best part of it is probably the deployment clasp branded with the Seiko logo, which can be swapped out to whatever strap you replace this one with. And before we do swap it out, let's see how it looks on wrist. For a watch that has more of a sporty vibe going, this strap does seem a little bit at odds with that, and dresses up more than down. It contrasts pretty strongly with the brighter dial, and to be honest, I'm not a big fan of this look. Since this shares the same case as the 006 black dial version, that also means that the bracelet from that one will fit onto this watch. This is essentially what was more recently released as the SZSB035. A grey dial can be tricky to pull off on a bracelet when the shade of dial is similar to the steel of the case. It can get a bit lost and all look very monotone. As much as I'm a bracelet guy, I'm also not completely sold on this combination. Comparing it with something like the Citizen NB1050 I looked at in an earlier video, with a bit of a darker dial, hopefully you can see what I mean. The shade of grey on the Citizen is a bit darker and looks a bit more distinct from the metal of the case. Back to the Seiko, and here it is in a combination I think works best, a brown leather strap. One that has some accent stitching or is a bit more distressed, doesn't dress up the watch quite as much as the original black one did, and still contrasts really nicely against the grey dial. This is how I've worn the watch, and might just be the only way I'd actually wear it. I haven't swapped out the deployment clasp over to this one from the original, but if I'm ever bothered to, I might get around to it. While this particular model might share virtually the same design as the SZSB006 in black that we looked at previously, changing up the colour of the dial and the lume takes this watch from a vintage-esque exploring watch to something with a much more contemporary sports watch vibe. Doing a grey dial like this can be tough, and I probably wish the shade of grey was a bit darker to create some contrast against the stainless steel surrounding it. That would also make it look a bit more at home on a bracelet, which is an important thing for a sports watch. The other important element which this watch is lacking is lume. Yes, it's on the hands, but on the dial it's nowhere to be found. Even something as little as lume dots outside the markers would be enough. As it is, all those applied indices, including the 12 and 6 numerals, can get lost in the grey background depending on the light, which is a shame, because the design and balance of the dial is really well done and well considered. They're far from deal breakers, but considering all the other thought that went into the design, it seems strange to have been overlooked. If you're not a fan of this colour version, worry not, because there are at least 4 others out there. You just have to find them. What do you think about this watch? Is it the best colour of these TicTac collabs? Do you have one of the others in your collection? Am I a bit too into these models? Let me know in the comments, and I'll see you next time.